All right, looks like we are just past the top of the hour. We have a few people coming in, but we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you everybody for being here for the November 2021 Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspective on Drought and Hydrologic Conditions. I am Megan Shargorodsky, and I am the interim director of the Kentucky Climate Center and interim state climatologist for Kentucky. With me today, I have Chip Zimmer from the Kentucky Division of Water, as well as Matt Dixon from the UK Ag Weather Center. So just some general information before we get going on the rest of the presentation. This webinar series is a partnership between the Kentucky Climate Center and the Western Kentucky University and the National Integrated Drought Information System and the Midwest Drought Early Warning System. The production and delivery of this webinar reflects the contributions of many partners. I mentioned a couple, both the University of Kentucky, the Kentucky Division of Water, as well as other entities across the state and in the United States. Our next regularly scheduled webinar is going to be on December 2nd, 2021, and that will be our last webinar for 2021. By that time, we will have switched over to standard time. That is happening this weekend, but officially we are still on daylight time. The webinar is also being streamed on YouTube right now. So hopefully we have some people watching there as well as you on Zoom as well. And if you ever need to go back and look at a previous recording, you can go to that same YouTube channel for the Kentucky Climate Center and reference that material. Want to promote the Kentucky Drought and Hydrologic Impact Reporter that was created by Chip Zimmer at the Kentucky Division of Water. You can go to this link to report your impacts through the Survey 123 app. And you can see what has been reported on the ArcGIS story map at the link at the bottom. And while it does have the word drought in the title, we do want to encourage reports of any other kind of hydrologic conditions, whether you see flooding or if it is actually drought. It's important for us to be able to capture all of those different types of events. So a quick outline of this presentation. So we will go over the recent conditions that have happened in October and in the first few days of November. We'll look at the impacts, both of weather and in agriculture. Then we'll move on to the outlooks of what we will see in November and during the winter. And then we'll conclude with a summary and questions and discussion. And so on the left-hand side here, you'll see webcam images from two of our Kentucky Mesonet weather stations. The top is from Bath County, and it was from late October. And one of my staff noted that when she looked at this image, that the hay bales were arranged such that they looked kind of like tombstones. So it seemed fitting that it was near Halloween whenever this was found. So that was a really fun find. And the bottom is from Wayne County in southern Kentucky. And that was just earlier this week. And it was a pretty good capture of the current cloudy conditions that we're seeing. There are some trees in the background that are changing, as well as the cows grazing on the grass that is still green. So moving on to the recent conditions. This is the 30-day radar estimated precipitation in the background, and those are the colors, and then the actual dots with the numbers are Kentucky Mesonet weather stations. So we see that most of the state has seen between 2 to 4 inches. There are a few areas, notably in south central Kentucky, that have seen over 5 inches, and there's also some up in just northeast of the Lexington area that has seen over 5 inches. And these are this little strip right here that you see basically between the I-65 and I-75 corridor will be coming up repeatedly in this first half, just because that has been a focus of a lot of the rain that we have seen. Moving on to the 60-day, again, this center strip is much higher than the surrounding areas. We're seeing the western third of the state has about 5 to 7 inches for over the 60-day period on the Kentucky Mesonet stations, and same with the eastern third. But then the center between the 65 and 75 corridor are pushing 10 to 11 inches in some areas. And I'll put that into perspective in just a moment as we look at the percent of normal. Looking at the 90-day, again, this area, while it does expand farther into eastern Kentucky, western Kentucky does still have some spots of lower precipitation. We have 7.85 inches in our Hopkins County station, which is a bit lower than some of the other surrounding stations. You'll also notice that there are a couple of near 20-inch values. One of those is in the Barron County location in south central Kentucky, and then there is a 19 up in Bath County. So here's where we put this into perspective. So this is looking at the percent of normal. So this puts a reference on what we're seeing in those previous images. So looking at the 30-day in the upper left, again, most of the state was seeing below normal precipitation. And again, the past few webinars, we've emphasized that the normals have changed. It was previously 1981 through 2010, and now it is 1991 through 2020 for the averages. So as we are looking at this, you need to keep in mind that not only is this below normal, it's below the increased normal as well. So overall, October was below normal precipitation. There is that same corridor in between I-65 and I-75 that experienced above normal precip. This is due to some of the heavier precipitation that came through the area. And it somewhat led to a feast or famine event where you'd have flash flooding in these regions that either had high precipitation storms or had just steady rain all day long. And so in comparison, these areas that did not receive rain had much fewer inches over the month. Much of the state remains below normal in the 90-day time frame. However, there is still that section in western Kentucky that is about 75% below normal. And a lot of this reflects the conditions that we saw in August. August was a somewhat wet month, and toward the end. In the beginning, we thought that we were heading into flash drought, and then suddenly it started raining again. And so those were very welcome rains for a lot of people. So looking at the standardized precipitation index, this is an index that concerns only precipitation, and it takes this takes the data and normalizes it to 0 so that you're able to see if it is above 0, it is wet, and if it is below 0, it is dry. So looking at Kentucky on the right side, you'll see that you have both yellow and green, which is basically right around on either side of 0. And moving on to the 60-day, you do see that it does start increasing from the blue and the orange. So you're getting a little bit more of that dichotomy. However, moving to the 90-day, you see even more of the yellow go away, but then also you see purple, which is above normal standardized precipitation index over in southeast Kentucky. Looking at the temperature departures, this is perhaps one of the most interesting parts of this webinar, at least from whenever I was preparing it. This is what stood out the most. So looking at the average maximum temperature for October, as well as the average minimum temperature for October. Again, going back to the fact that we have this different normals period, we know that the average minimum temperature had increased between these two periods. So looking at this, you're seeing that both of these have increased just for the month of October of 2021. The pink, while it's not in Kentucky, is still very significant. That is 10 degrees Fahrenheit above normal for the average minimum temperature. The numbers that do go into Kentucky are between the 8 and 9 range, and then in some of the other areas is 4 to 6 or so. That's pretty significant when you're looking at minimum temperatures. Whenever you're looking at this and you don't have that cool off period overnight as expected, it does affect a lot of different systems across the industries and across the state. So average minimum temperature was also above normal as well. And moving to the modeled soil moisture and groundwater, we do have this increase in soil moisture because of the rain that we had. Again, you can see that in the Kentucky area, it is centered in that middle section of the state. And if you go to the right side where you're looking at satellite-based data, you can see that Kentucky has been fairly wet during this period as well. So bringing in some Kentucky mesonet soil data, usually we just show soil moisture data. However, this time I wanted to bring in soil temperature. So on the left side, you'll see soil moisture. And this is from our Todd County and Crittenden County stations that are in Western Kentucky. And you'll see that on the bottom, there was a pretty extended period that did not have any rain. Again, this is in the western part of the state that did not see a lot of the rain that central and northern Kentucky did. Same with Todd County. You can see that light blue line respond a few times. Those were relatively light rain showers, but they did not soak in deeper until you get farther into the month where you're looking at the rain event that happened, I think on the 29th or 30th. On the right-hand side is the soil temperature. And while it looks a little bit crazy on the graph, you can see a very marked change. And that is on October 16th when we had that very sharp cold front come through. And everything is holding fairly steady. You know, it averages between the 70 and 65 in the Nicholas County graph. And then suddenly on the 16th, between the 16th and 17th, you see that 2-inch sensor in particular drops down to 55. So, and then everything just starts trending downward. So it's very clear that we have shifted in our seasons. And while we will have some warmer temperatures, you know, we generally have that one really brisk cold front that comes through, and that was it. Looking at the evaporative demand drought index, we've talked about this in most of our other webinars, but just to remind, this is the index that basically describes how thirsty the air is and how much demand for moisture there is in the air. So looking at the 1 week, again, it's been somewhat wet in especially the northern part of the state. So there is not very much demand. and most of the state is white, which is basically breaking even. But going into the 1 month, because we did see a bit of drier conditions in certain parts of October, we do see the yellow categories showing up a bit more, particularly in far eastern Kentucky, where there has been another section of lighter rain that has been recorded. Looking at the stream flow from the USGS stream flow gauges, I would say that about a third of these are at normal flow. However, there are quite a few of the light blue and dark blue that are showing that they're above normal and much above normal stream flow. And keeping in mind that this is based on what is normal for this time of year. So it is important to take that into consideration, because the stream flow in the fall may be is very different than what it is in the middle of summer or in the spring. The 28-day average basically reflects the same thing. However, there are a few more of the normal green dots. And this will be good to keep in mind as we look a little bit later on the potential for the flood risk for the coming months later on. Current flooding as of last night, there's very little risk for flooding with regard to the gauges that are displayed here. There are some gauges that are reporting minor flooding up in the Indiana, Illinois area. However, nothing is registering in Kentucky. The U.S. Drought Monitor is a great tool, and it is really invaluable whenever you're looking and considering drought. There are people from across the nation that are reporting in their conditions. And as you can see, the western part of the United States has been repeatedly hit with drought. I think it is reaching a record for the amount of time spent in these drought conditions. So we are incredibly fortunate in Kentucky that we are seeing no signs of drought at this time. The rainfall that we have received has come at pretty good intervals to help prevent that. Looking at the change in conditions, you'll notice how horrible the western part of the U.S. looks, and then noticing here that it's indicating there's been no change in that area. So that is a really tough situation, especially for California, who's already pressed for water resources. But looking at Kentucky, again, there's a little bit that I guess it's surrounding the state that has improved. That means that 4 weeks ago, there was a small hint of abnormally dry conditions, but again, that has resolved in this time. Looking at Kentucky alone, again, we have had very fortunate conditions since the start of the calendar year, which here is December 29th of last year. We have only had abnormally dry conditions for about 23% of the state. And then looking at 3 months ago, which was August, as we were facing the potential of a flash drought developing, that was 3.92%. So again, the state is clear of abnormally dry conditions and any signs of drought. As we're heading into the winter, we will likely see this stay the same, but again, it depends on how everything sets up in the main flow of weather systems. Another very notable thing that I wanted to talk about is the severe weather warnings. So I remember looking at this last year and noting that 2020 was pretty low in the number of severe thunderstorm and tornado warning counts for Kentucky. And that's issued by the National Weather Service. However, 2021 has been incredibly lower. It is just above half of what 2020 was at this point. Usually we see a secondary severe storm season in September, October, sometimes into November. We have not really seen that this year or last year. And so as a result, the really interesting thing is the fact that we're seeing such low severe weather warnings. However, we are seeing a lot of flash flood impacts. And the connection there is probably just more on the type of storm that is being developed, as opposed to having the severe storms coming through. We're seeing these high precipitation storms coming through that are putting out a lot of rain, but they're not necessarily putting out wind or hail or anything. So we'll see what 2022 has to hold pretty soon. But as of right now, it looks like we'll finish off 2021 at a very low count. This is also what I just mentioned is reflected here. So we had a few bouts of storms come through. There were some winds that were reported both in Western Kentucky and Eastern Kentucky on October 11th and 28th. And those were actually not storm related. Those were non-thunderstorm related winds just from the passage of the weather system. There were some flash flooding reports in the Lexington area that you'll see kind of in the middle with the wavy water, and that was on October 7th and 8th. So the trees that you're seeing are from wind damage that are actually due to thunderstorms. That was that October 15th, 16th cold front passage that was pretty significant, and it had it was relatively widespread precipitation as the front moved, but only certain areas received this higher wind damage. Oh, and I guess that's this is where we move on to Matt Dixon from the UK Ag Weather Center, and he will talk for a few minutes about the ag impacts.
All right. Thanks, Megan. Happy November, everyone. The growing season is officially over for Kentucky this year. We had some pretty cool temperatures yesterday morning across primarily the eastern half of the state. Western Kentucky stayed predominantly in the 30s, but that was a different story this morning. Below is a look at minimum temperatures from the Kentucky Mesnet, with just about everyone across the state in the mid to upper 20s this morning. Even had a reading of 21 degrees, and I believe that's Meade County there in the north central Kentucky. This will be considered a killing freeze, and I can finally say goodbye, fall armyworm. These pests don't overwinter here and are killed off by that first frost. So looking at climate normals and our average first freeze of the season, this is a little past that average, but not much. For most, the new climate normals puts the date in late October. I also want to mention that the freeze warning last night will be the last one for the fall season. These frost and freeze headlines are based on agricultural susceptibility at any point in the year. I talked to the National Weather Service yesterday, and ag is pretty much done. The only concern I had was with cyanide poisoning, or some may also call it prussic acid poisoning, which is a harmful toxin to livestock, produced by Johnson grass and other sorghum species after light frost. In fact, if enough is consumed in high enough concentrations, livestock can die from the toxin. So, um, specialists say not to graze for at least 2 weeks after a non-killing frost, anything greater than 28 degrees. You can graze after a killing frost when the plant material is dry and brown, which is usually about 3 days after the freeze. So I'll post a link in the chat box to an article about the toxin after I'm done talking. But outside of the freeze, harvest has been a slow go this year. This has been the trend. Corn has been slow to dry down. Didn't help when we closed out October with a very wet week of weather. Our data here at the Ag Weather Center showed that over the last full week of the month, we averaged 1.58 inches across the state behind multiple rounds of rainfall. This did include a prolonged period of wet weather late last week. You all may recall as a low pressure system was slow to work across the area. Looking at the table, corn harvested now sits at 84%, behind the 5-year average of 92%. Soybeans are at 56, 8% behind the 5-year average of 64. Not too far behind, but we do have some good news this week. Outside of some light showers Monday night, conditions have been dry since and expected to stay that way over much of the upcoming week. So good news in that aspect. Overall, I've heard good news in the form of yields this year also. As Megan said, it helps that we haven't really had to deal with prolonged dry conditions this year or severe weather events. USDA NASS came out with their latest estimates on October 12th, which forecasted record highs for corn and bean yields. Corn yield is estimated at 185 bushels per acre and beans at 55. Hay production has also been up compared to 2020. All in all, we've had 2 really good back-to-back years of agricultural production in Kentucky following that dry end to the 2019 season. So looking at crop conditions, livestock and pasture conditions are doing all right at this point, but I'm a bit concerned moving forward. We'll probably talk about this more next month, but the expected La Nina pattern leads to above normal precip across much of Kentucky. We've now went 5 straight months with above normal rainfall in place ahead of the winter months. Moisture, bottom line, has not been a problem this year for the most part. Megan also showed stream flows earlier that are running above normal right now. Our winters have also been trending wetter and warmer over the past decade, leading to headaches with the amount of mud in pastures across the state. This often leads to higher energy requirements for our cattle and thus extra feed. So it can also lead to decreased gains and some health problems, but hopefully we don't have this problem, but it has been a trend here in Kentucky. Luckily, it looks like our hay supplies are pretty solid going into the winter months. I know we have some extension pubs in my department about mitigating the mud problems, but some of these mitigations might be installing concrete pads or other all-weather surfaces. You can also add hay ring feeders or just simply decrease the density of cattle over one location. So anyways, hope we don't have to deal with it this year, but I'll probably look more into this forecast over the upcoming month, give you guys an update in the December webinar. So with that, that's all I have. I'll send it back to you, Megan.
Thanks, Matt, for a great update. So Chip Zimmer from the Kentucky Division of Water mentioned in the chat that, I'll go back one more. Just wanted to jump back to this real quick. He noted that some of the other other years that are at the bottom of this graph, some of those are drought years, and that a lot of the years that we have seen fewer than normal severe weather warnings have also been drought years. So the fact that we haven't really seen a whole lot of drought yet, we're still relatively low in the weather warnings, is a very interesting thing to mention. Moving on to the outlook section of our webinar. So looking at the quantitative precipitation forecast, which is for the 7-day period looking forward, puts not very much rain into the state. There is a little bit in northern Kentucky. However, looking at, if you're going to look past that, it does increase a bit in the basically 8 to 10 day period, which I'll show in just a minute. Jumping over to the National Weather Service Climate Prediction Center outlooks. In general, as we're moving forward into the winter, we are generally seeing that we will have these above normal temperature and precipitation conditions. It does vary just a little bit, but as we'll see in a moment, there are looming La Nina conditions that will encourage this pattern. The 8 to 14 day is where we do see this above, this increase in precipitation just outside of that 7-day period for the quantitative precipitation. So this puts us at near normal temperatures during this period, but the above normal precipitation. The monthly temperature and precipitation outlook both give us basically equal chances of being above normal or being below normal. So we'll see what November brings. Hopefully, maybe we'll be right in the middle and we'll be exactly normal. Looking at the seasonal outlook, this is more on the scale of where La Nina will come into play, where we do see this above normal temperature as well as above normal precip. And so we keep talking about La Nina, and I know that most know of El Nino, which is when we have this section of colder than normal sea surface temperatures in the Pacific. So La Nina is the counterpart of that, where it is a warmer than normal pattern. And so on the top is the actual sea surface temperature as it was from August through October. And then on the bottom is the anomaly, which is the departure from normal. So right now we don't see a La Nina pattern. However, we are expecting to see it develop and get stronger, focusing more on December. So it doesn't show up right now. However, we are expecting the winter to be highly impacted by this pattern, and it will show up not only again in the temperatures, but then also in our precip that we will see. We'll see probably more rain as we are getting into the middle of winter as the year changes over and everything. But in the meantime, we'll have this general warmer and wetter pattern before that as well. Looking at the monthly stream flow outlook, again, we have some of these areas that are seeing above normal stream flow, and it's expected for that to probably stay that way through the rest of November, especially depending on how much rain we do end up getting in some of these areas. It could be more greatly impacted. The seasonal flood risk outlook, because we do have these areas that are seeing higher than normal stream flow gauge values, we do see the potential for some long range flooding as we move forward into the November, December, January period. Because we've been so wet, there is not a whole lot of wildland fire potential in Kentucky. It's about at equal chances of normal. So we're very thankful for that. So wrapping up, most of Kentucky, again, saw below normal precipitation, even though we did see several rounds of precipitation. There was a swath of above normal precipitation in the I-65 to I-75 corridors because that area repeatedly had heavy thunderstorms going through. The severe weather has been significantly lower than recent years. There has been also that counterpart of increased flash flooding because of these slow moving showers and high precipitation storms. The temperatures for October were above normal, in particular, the average low temperatures. Kentucky agriculture remains in good shape, not going into the summer, going into the winter, as well as there is the increased likelihood of La Nina this winter as we face December, January, February, and that will bring warmer and wetter than normal conditions. And so I'm sure that the December webinar, when we bring that at the beginning of December, we'll be able to talk about how that is shaping up a little bit more. So thank you everybody for listening. We'll move into our questions and discussion section of the webinar, and feel free to either type into the chat box a question, or you can unmute and ask if you need to. We would be happy to discuss. All right. Well, thank you so much again for coming and listening. If you have any questions that come around after you log off, you can feel free to get in touch with any of the contacts that are listed here. You can get in touch with us on social media. You can, again, go to the YouTube channel for the Kentucky Climate Center and view this recording, or you can share it. The next regularly scheduled webinar will be December 2nd. It's a Thursday, as these have all been, and we will probably be asking for your input on how to approach the 2022 year on the presentation method. So again, we want to make sure to have another plug for the Kentucky Drought and Hydrologic Impact Reporter. It is a great tool that we would love for more people to be using. I'll also go ahead and plug that we have an updated Kentucky Mesonet phone app. And so if you've already had the app downloaded, it'll show up as an update for that app. If you haven't downloaded it yet, then go to the App Store and type in Kentucky Mesonet, and you'll be able to find it. And you'll be able to get your current conditions on your pocket or on your phone at any time. And we look forward to you doing that as well. So with that, we will go ahead and round out this webinar. And I thank you again for attending.